Hi there, Ryan Rastall here for Golfshake.com. We are here at Howley Hall Golf Club in Leeds where I'm the head professional, and today we're going to talk you through how to select the right wedge for your game. So before we get into all that, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. See loads more content from all of us here at Golfshake to help you play more and play better. So when we're talking about wedges, okay, these are the ones I use in my set. So I have a 50, a 54 and a 60, right? Varying different bounces and different grinds, which we'll get into in a second. Basically, when we're fitting somebody for wedges, the first thing we look at is how far they want their wedges to go. So we try and gap the set properly. Most pitching wedges, I mean, mine in my set is 46 degrees, but a lot of wedges now are stronger than that. Generally, the first port of call is finding a gap wedge that will fit in the set. So it's going to go further than a sand wedge, but less than your pitching wedge, okay? And hopefully sit somewhere in the middle. Now, for me, with my wedge being 46, 50 degrees fills that gap quite nicely. These wedges that I have here, Callaway JAWS Raw, I've used Callaway wedges for a while now, and you'll see on the bottom of these clubs, we have the Loft, 54 degrees, we have 10, which is the amount of bounce the club's got, and S, which is the grind, okay? So to start with, let's talk about bounce. Now, what is bounce? It's basically measured in degrees, and it's the angle between the leading edge and the trailing edge of the wedge, okay? So the amount of kind of angle the sole has on it, if you like. In this wedge, 54 degrees, 10 bounce. So if we look at the sole here, there is 10 degrees between the leading edge and the back edge. What does more and less bounce help you do? That's when we get into the fitting side of it, okay? In general, more bounce will help that player who maybe plays a softer golf course. So if the ground is softer and the wedge tends to dig into the ground, or they're that type of technique where they hit down on the ball a lot and take a massive divot, more bounce will stop that wedge digging into the ground. They also tend to be very useful when you're playing bunker shots. Obviously, sand is a very loose material. More bounce out of bunkers tends to help people get the ball out and play a bit more versatile. And the reason for that is because generally in a bunker, we will open the face, and the higher the bounce means more mass is underneath the golf ball. So it's going to help you get the ball out the bunker easier. So if you're struggling out of bunkers, have a bit of a look at your wedge, see how much bounce is on it, and if it's, you know, a number under 10, potentially something slightly higher bounce may help you get them out easier. Just something as simple as that can help. If we were to play links turf a lot and it's really hard, compact, and particularly in the middle of summer when it's absolutely rock hard, wedges with less bounce on tend to be better. They'll help you get it off the turf and kind of nip it off there a little bit easier. What we don't want is that back edge coming into play on firm turf, because it can make you thin it, and it just kind of compromises the strike a little bit. We're going to talk you through a very simple way of fitting wedges now. So what I've done is I've put some lye tape on the bottom of a couple of these different wedges. So I've selected one that's got a W, which is a wide grind in this JAWS Raw wedge, and one that's got an X, which X is basically, you can see in my 60 degree here, X grind, you can see some of the heel and the toe have been taken away. So it makes this wedge quite versatile. So we've got a little bit of leading edge relief on there as well. So if you want to play that wedge with the hands forward and hit down it a bit more, it'll allow you to do that and get that leading edge engaged with the ground. But also if you want to play that bunker shot, because we've got 12 bounce on here, which is quite high, we're able to open the face and not get too much of a, you know, a dig into the ground there as well. I've put some tape on the bottom. I'm just going to play a little pitch in here and show you exactly what happens when we look at the sole, okay? We can see a decent shot, a nice little bit of spin on there as well, but let's look at the sole, okay? So we can see where it's hit the ground is more towards the middle to leading edge of the wedge, right? So it's kind of pretty center in the sole really, but that type of pitch shot there, I'm going to play it with the handle slightly forward, and that little bit of leading edge relief really helps me do that. And certainly when you look at a golf club and sit it flat on your hand, the handle wants to sit forward, so we do want that bit of shaft lean to play a nice wedge shot with. If you're that type of player that I see a lot of when I'm coaching, and you kind of try and flick the ball off the ground and help it with your hands, that's when we have a wedge like this. This is a wider grind, so the W grind, and you can see here that type of player would tend to get middle to the back edge of the wedge when they're hitting it off the lie board, right? So this W grind In contrast to the X that we've just shown you, W is wide, all right? So that sole is really, really wide. We've got loads of mass behind the golf ball when we're hitting the shot. And also, if you're that player that wants to flick it off the ground, you've also got more mass helping you do that. So when it comes to choosing the grind that you want, you've kind of got to weigh up a little bit the player's short game. So you've got to look at the types of shot they like to hit. If they're a player who likes to open the face a lot and play flop shots, a W grind's maybe not the easiest wedge to do that because we don't have any relief in the heel. Whereas when we look at the Z grind and the X grind, you can see we do get that little bit of relief in here. It doesn't play its full width all the way down, and it's slightly lower bounce, okay? So we don't have as much of an angle between the leading edge and back edge, so playing that type of shot can be a little bit more simple. If you're that player who digs it and takes a big divot, you need more bounce. If you clip it off the top and don't take a divot, less bounce is good, okay? So I'm gonna show you now a few out of the bunker and what some of the different grinds will do when we're trying to play bunker shots. When we're talking about selecting the right grind and the right wedge out of a bunker, we need, again, to think about the type of bunker player that we're looking at. I'm going to try the Z grind to start with. Less bounce, this Z grind with a bit of leading edge relief and back edge relief there now. So out of a bunker like this, where the sand is pretty firm, I think this is going to be, it's quite an easy wedge to use, but I think with it having 8 bounce, it may be more difficult to play a bunker shot like this. But let me play a few. Let's hit a few towards this flag. With it having lower bounce and with it having that bit of relief, I'm going to want to play it with the face a little bit more open, okay? So that's going to help me to get the ball in the air and hopefully stop it quicker when it hits the green. Okay, so we get a nice shot in there. It's ran out nicely. Wasn't the best contact, but we've kind of got away with it a little bit there. But we could see there, it hasn't really, because of the low bounce, it hasn't taken much sand with it either, okay? So we'll just play one more with it. It was almost like a glancing blow off the top of the sand, really. We can see there, I could be a bit more aggressive with it. Go on, go in. It's pretty close. But yeah, I could be a bit more aggressive with it with having that lower bounce on there. Right, when we look at something that has more bounce on it, right? So we've got this W grind wedge now, and if we hit it out of the same place, we would expect, now that we've got higher bounce in 12 and W in that wide grind, so a much thicker sole, we're going to expect this now to take more sand with it, and potentially, even if I'm playing it with a square face, which I'm going to do here, we should find it fairly easy to get the ball out. In fact, I've taken way too much sand there, yeah? So we can see there, just through the contrast of those few, that this is gonna really get loads of sand out and help you get more mass under the ball. So like I say, if you're that player who struggles to get it out of a bunker, these wider grinds and wider soles make it so much easier to do that. When it comes to playing shots around the greens, and particularly off bare lies or really tight lies, having the right grind and bounce in your wedge is essential to be able to actually play the shot. This type of lie here would scare the life out of a lot of people if they were having to try and get this ball up in the air onto the green and stop it somewhere near that flag. And certainly it's not an easy shot to do, but the right wedge could really help you with that. So the one I've got here, 60, 8 bounce and Z grind, okay? So we've got less bounce, so it should sit tighter to the ground and make this shot a little bit easier, okay? So having that slightly tighter leading edge and less kind of mass there behind the wedge, it should make these types of shots a little bit easier to play. So we can hear the sole getting involved in that, the little bit of check as it lands as well, and we're able to actually hit down with a bit of confidence here, knowing that hopefully this wedge is going to help us play this shot. So again, with that bit of relief, we can even play it with the face slightly open. Yeah, and really nip it off the turf and get loads of spin on it. That one's just ran out a little bit. But if we look at the wider grind wedge trying to play this shot, now we've got more bounce and we've got more width in the sole here as well. That's going to make this shot a hell of a lot more difficult. So if I try and play exactly the same shot with the wider grind here, you see how it just fires off the face, yeah? It's very difficult to actually engage the leading edge with the ground properly and play this shot how we'd like. And certainly I can't really open the face because we've got so much mass in the sole there, yeah? So let me just try and play one more. Again, it just comes off so quick. Whereas the other ones, you could see the sound was completely different because we're kind of nipping them off the surface because that leading edge relief and because there's less mass at the back of the wedge there. So playing shots off, you know, harder surfaces and also with really short grass, we tend to want a little bit less bounce, and we also want some relief on the back of the wedge as well to play that shot. So in summary, if you're looking at some new wedges, one, you need to go and get properly fitted, okay? You need to go and find somebody who understands your short game, can spend a bit of time with you and have a look at all the different wedges in terms of the lofts to gap your set, the bounces, so looking at your technique and how your short game works for you, because we're all different. We've seen here in the Callaway JAWS Raw range that there are lots of different lofts, grinds and bounces available. There's 20, I think there's 24 or 25 different variations just within this wedge family alone. So each brand obviously has lots of different grinds, bounces and lofts available, and it's definitely worth getting fitted. But as a bit of a kind of tick list for you, you need to make sure you've got the right loft for the distances you want to hit your pitch shots, and I would get obviously the right bounces and the right grinds, but really it's about trying to make sure your short game is as easy as possible, okay? And I would have a bit of a variation between, I wouldn't get every wedge in the same grind and the same bounce, for instance. So I'd have a bit of variation in there so that if you are called upon to play a shot out of a bunker that's got really deep sand, you've maybe got something with a bit more bounce on it and a bit more loft that you can do that. But also, if you need to hit something off a really hard surface like this, potentially we've got one with a better grind on it and less bounce as well. But if you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments section below. Be more than happy to answer them, and hopefully you've walked away from this with a little bit better understanding of how your wedges work.